Emily is professor in post-colonial literature and an internationally renowned expert on the trickster figure in the folklore, oral cultures, and literature of the African diaspora. She has published widely in this field, including her books Anancy's Journey, A Story of Jamaican Cultural Resistance, and American Trickster, Trauma, Tradition, and Brer Rabbit. These books received critical international acclaim. And if you bear with me, I would like to read out just 2 quotes. Zobel Marshall is a fabulous guide through this rich and original blend of Afro-Caribbean history, sociology, and folklore. Her book, a model of lucidity exhibiting all the best of academic writing, should appeal equally to the lay reader as to the established student of the field. That was on her Anancy book. As a work of cultural anthropology that traces the origins, adaptations, distortions, and reclamations of the folkloric Brer Rabbit trickster figure in literary and cinematographic forms, this is an exceptionally useful piece of scholarship. Emily is also a very accomplished poet, with work including the 2021 People Press anthology Weighted Words, Magma, Smoke Magazine, The Caribbean Writer, and Stand. Her poetry collection, Bath of Herbs from People Tree Press, has been described as spellbinding and a beautifully crafted exploration of hybrid identities in nature. Beyond academia, Professor Zobel Marshall is deeply involved in Caribbean carnival cultures. She plays mass in the Leeds West Indian Carnival and established a Caribbean carnival cultures research platform to connect critical, creative, academic, and artistic perspectives. Professor Zobel Marshall is the co-chair of the David Oluwole Memorial Association, a charity dedicated to fighting racism and homelessness, and regularly contributes to media discussions on race and racial politics. Tonight, Professor Zobel Marshall will draw on over 25 years of research here at Leeds Beckett University. Her fieldwork in Jamaica, Trinidad, Martinique, New Orleans, California, New Mexico, her own nature poetry, and journey to becoming a mountain leader. Colleagues and guests, it is my great pleasure to now introduce Professor Zobel Marshall.
Now let me just get this mic sorted. Okay. How are we all doing? It's lovely to have you all here. Wow. So, I'd like to start by thanking you guys, my friends, my family, my colleagues, and everyone who is interested in my work and who supported me. I feel really privileged to be here today with all of you. And I've been looking forward to this lecture with a kind of mixture of excitement and nervousness, because I have so much to say in a short time to say it in. And when I reflect on my life as a researcher, I also have so many thank yous to the people who have raised me up and helped to put me here. Now I'm going to start with my mum. Always the tech, isn't it? I'm going to start with my mum, as I know she'd be really proud to be here today. And I always felt that my mum was like my #1 fan. She'd always be sitting at the front of every event I did. I could just imagine her now, totally keen, correcting my posture, commenting on my voice projection, and doing all sorts of dramatic gestures, and always so full of love. My dad can be here today. Thank you for making the journey from Devon with the lovely Liz. And my career as a researcher really starts with my mum and my dad. My dad is an author in anarchist philosophy, and my mum wrote plays, stories, poems, and scripts throughout her life. I grew up with writing as a normal, natural way of self-expression. My mum was born in Martinique, in the French Caribbean, and her father, Joseph Zobel, has also been a huge source of inspiration to me. Perfect. So this is my father's book, A History of Anarchism, one of his best-known books. And his anarchist philosophies have really been foundational for me in my own journey. And this is my grandfather's book, Joseph Zobel, Black Shack Alley, which is an overtly anti-colonial book which tells the story of his childhood growing up in Martinique in a sugarcane plantation. And I know that he would have been very proud to have known that his book has become a Penguin classic, and that I now teach it to my own students here at Leeds Beckett University. So this is my grandfather here, Joseph Zobel, and his book was turned into a beautiful film. I know I'm a little bit biased, called La Rue Cazenègre, which was turned into a film in the 1980s, and that's a film poster of the film of his book. Now, in that film, there is a storyteller called Monsieur Meadows. He's a griot, and he was a hugely inspirational figure to me. The film is autobiographical, so Monsieur Meadows was a central person in my grandfather's life. Now, it was through Caribbean bedtime stories read to me as a child about the adventures of Anancy and Brer Rabbit that I first became really excited about trickster characters. And it was this griot character, Monsieur Meadows, in my grandfather's book, who showed me the pivotal role of oral storytelling in Black culture. How storytellers keep our history alive and give people strength to continue to survive in the most adverse circumstances. The book and the film gave me very early on an insight into the legacies of enslavement, the importance of my African heritage, and also the debilitating effects of colonialism. It really formed the foundations of my journey as a post-colonial researcher. Now, I grew up in North Wales, surrounded by mountains, which is where my love of hiking began, but more on that in a moment. And after being quite a high achieving student at secondary school, and then a couple of misspent years attending outdoor raves, I came to Leeds Metropolitan, so it was Leeds Metropolitan back then. And I studied an undergraduate degree in English and history. At Leeds Met, I found an incredibly nurturing environment, and this is why I stayed on forever. To complete an MA, a PhD, and then to work as a senior lecturer in the School of Cultural Studies. Now, the lecturers at the school, they had time for me. They wanted to encourage my passions, and they were people that I could look up to in life. My wonderful tutor, Peter Beckett, who's here tonight, wrote a reference for me once when I was 19. You may not remember this, Peter. Where's Peter? There he is. You may not remember this, Peter, but you said in that reference that I had a mercurial approach to English literature, which fits the bill in terms of my love of tricksters and shapeshifters, but also suggested I may have lacked a little bit of focus. in my first years at uni. And it was really in my third year that my love of research really came alive. I decided to research Anancy and Caribbean folklore for my undergraduate dissertation, and then later on for my PhD. I wanted to trace Anancy, the trickster, from his roots in West Africa through to his role as a trickster in the Caribbean plantations. Now, enslaved people brought the trickster stories of Anancy, a small spider, from Ghana and other West African countries to the Caribbean. And there those stories were told on the plantations. The stories tell of small characters who turned the tables on the powerful, using their brains rather than their brawn. And while they were stories that were connected to the gods in the West African context, in the Caribbean, they've become much more about the enslaved person trying to carve some kind of space for themselves within the oppressive hierarchy of the plantation. My argument is that the trickster stories become coded strategies of survival and resistance for the enslaved people. And so this project, I realized quite quickly, was quite unique, that nothing had really been written about this extraordinary cultural phenomenon before. I turned my PhD on Anancy into my first academic book, Anancy's Journey. I published the book with the University of the West Indies, which really felt right to me. I've always been wary of being a researcher that parachutes in and doesn't give back. I try to avoid to work with extractive methods of research. So for me to publish the first book in the Caribbean really felt like the right thing to do. Now, the early 20th century psychotherapist, Charles Jung, has a great many interesting things to say about trickster figures. One of them being that they are universal archetypes. He also, though problematically, sees tricksters as central to indigenous cultures because they are part of the workings of the primitive mind. Now, one of the most important things that I've learned on my academic journey is that academic frameworks that we work with within the university are very white and very Western centric. And we have to create new critical frameworks to truly understand and to truly celebrate Black cultural resistance. But Jung's deeply problematic perspective, despite this, he does shed light on our need for the trickster figure and trickster stories within our societies. So he helps to explain the need to revel in the fantasies of freedom, in the fantasies of breaking boundaries and binaries that restrict us to particular codes of behavior in human society. We're all restricted by ways of being and ways of behaving, but the trickster character knows no bounds. They can do anything. They can turn the world upside down. So we revel in these fantasies of not being chained to, or not being restricted by the rules of human society. It strikes me that the trickster is found in cultures across time and across continents because we dream of being free. And perhaps that's partly also my hippie anarchist upbringing that makes me think this way. But in fantasy, we enjoy following the actions of a character who can do anything he or she pleases and injects chaos into a tightly structured and ordered world. But then my argument is that the plantation trickster stories in times of total oppression, such as enslavement, stop being fantasies. They're about seizing freedom in the here and now. So the actions of the tricksters become those coded strategies of resistance and survival. Those Anancy tactics are a way of carving space for yourself in a corrupt and brutal system. Now, I was helped on this research journey into the Anancy trickster character by Max Farrer. Where's Max? There he is. Come on, say hi, Max. Now, Max has been a constant thread throughout my career, and I owe him so much. Max was my PhD supervisor. It was hard work keeping him in line. But we call him the Professor Pedant because he's very, very accurate about typos, which is perfect for me and my bad spelling. But his meticulous Prof Pedant feedback and also endless joie de vivre and enthusiasm for life have really kept me going in my research journey. Now, in my early 20s, I conducted a 3-month period of PhD research in Kingston in Jamaica. And I was supported by Mary Eagleton, Professor Mary Eagleton, and Professor Simon Gunn, and also the then Vice Chancellor, Simon Lee, who helped fund the trip. These are people who helped me mature academically. And I'll never forget Professor Simon Gunn's advice to never privilege the brain over the body. So take breaks while you work, go for a walk, have some fresh air, recalibrate, connect back in with your body, which is why I like to run and to go while swimming. And I also remember a time when Professor Simon Gunn, this is when I was quite young, he asked me impromptu, when I turned up to a conference at Leeds Met, he said, "Would you like to be the chair, Emily?" And I had no idea what that meant. And I rushed outside and got him a really comfy chair to sit in. Now, in doing my fieldwork in Jamaica, I loved being a detective in the archives. I really found that thrill of research, you know, of finding out new information and going through old boxes of archives and that hadn't been opened for decades. And I found the Anancy stories very much alive and well in Jamaica. Everybody I spoke to had an Anancy story to share, whether that was a taxi driver, a school kid, an academic. And I collected all these stories and I spoke to people and I understood more about the role of the Anancy stories in contemporary Jamaica. I was supported in my research by the Jamaican National Archives, the Museum, the National Library, and the University of the West Indies. And I need to say a special thanks here to Professor Jean Small, who really took me under her wing in Kingston, and also my friend Nicole Plummer and Peggy and Jimmy, who looked after me in every way. I started to present my folklore research yearly at the UK-based Society for Caribbean Studies, which is still going strong. And that was, again, a really nurturing environment for a young researcher. My first publication was prompted by Professor Sarah Lawson-Welch, and she came up to me after a conference and said, "You must publish this." I hadn't really thought about publishing at that time, and I submitted this article on Anancy to the World Literature's Written in English journal, and it was published, and that was my first academic publication. And later she became my external examiner, and she's always supported me. And I think this is very important. I think as a woman in academia, you need strong, inspiring, professional women in your life to act as your mentor and your guide, and she was one of them. So I've been at Leeds Beckett University, first as a student and then as staff for nearly 28 years. That's a good innings, isn't it? That is a good innings. Now, there's two other key women in my life who've been mentors for me. That's Professor Susan Watkins and Professor Ruth Robbins, where they are. Here, there they are. So I've always felt they've been in my corner and wished me nothing but success. And Susan especially has been a go-to person for academic advice for nearly 2 decades. And advice from everything of how to shape a professorial lecture to what to wear for one, which is equally important. So I'm so grateful for her support and her friendship. And also, I would like to give a shout out to my dearest colleague and friend, Dr. Rachel Rich, and for all the swims we've had together, the ways we've been able to return to our bodies from our brains, and for all the laughs and all the wisdom. Now, my next major research project was on the Brer Rabbit trickster figure. Now, Brer Rabbit is another trickster figure, but who has a very different cultural trajectory to the Anancy trickster. While the Anancy trickster is found in the Caribbean plantations and now in contemporary Caribbean society, Brer Rabbit is a US trickster figure. And the cultural trajectory of Brer Rabbit is that it's a story that was co-opted in the 1800s by white American folklorists and actually turned into a stereotype. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to describe that whole journey, but the Brer Rabbit stories became part of a kind of armor, if you like, or a weaponry against Black African Americans, to further denigrate them and to show them as somehow primitive. So the book traces that cultural trajectory from the plantations to then being co-opted by white storytellers, that the whole meaning being changed, and then how those stories have been reclaimed by Black American writers like Toni Morrison, like Nella Larson, and Ralph Ellison. So that was my sort of second big academic text, which took about 4 years to write and was published by Rowman and Littlefield. And without giving it, a huge amount of thought, I published an article as well about how the roots of the Beatrix Potter, Peter Rabbit stories were found in Brer Rabbit. And because the more research I did about Brer Rabbit, the more I realized that actually Beatrix Potter had drawn very heavily from the plot, the drawings, the structure, and the language of the Brer Rabbit folktales, which she read before she started writing her Peter Rabbit stories. I wrote a nice article for The Conversation, and then that was published in The Guardian in a nice 2-page spread, and then it all kicked off. It really all kicked off. So it was taken up by by the right-wing press, and and it was a real surprise to me. So I have this article here in the Daily Mail: why the academic accusing Beatrix Potter of stealing Peter Rabbit from a slave fable needs a good lie down. I needed a good lie down after reading all of that, I can tell you. The patronizing ... And then Peter Rabbit under threat from the woke mob, and it was on Fox News, it was on TV News, and I now have a nice pin badge which says "hated by the Daily Mail," which I wear with pride. It really touched a nerve, and I think I'm a lot more thick-skinned now. I had a lot of sexist, racist emails after this to my personal account, and that was a shock to me that people would take the time to do that. But I'm more thick-skinned and tougher as a result. And hopefully, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. Now, alongside my work on the trickster figure, my obsession with carnival cultures continued to grow. Now, in many ways, my work on carnival stems from the same fascination as the trickster figure. Firstly, in our fundamental need as human beings to be free, and also the incredible inventiveness of people of African descent, to use cultural forms like song, like dance, like costuming, like storytelling, and art as a call to arms, to challenge injustice and to thwart colonialism and its dark legacies. Now, the Russian theorist Mikhail Bakhtin has argued that medieval European carnivals were a time when the world was turned on its head. So in those medieval European carnivals, the theorist Bakhtin says, a beggar could become a king, a fool could mock the powerful, all the normal rules of our social order were reversed. But like with many Eurocentric theoretical ideas, they don't quite apply to Black cultural forms, and they don't quite apply to the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, it's not just the 3 days that things are turned on their heads. Their carnival is not that 3-day time of disorder, but a year-long revolution, which starts quietly with planning, with masquerade camps, but then erupts into weeks of revelry and protest on the streets. So this is play, but it's play with very serious intentions. And as the great carnival scholar Tony Hall would say, that the essence of Caribbean carnival is dance and fight, dance and fight. My carnival research really took off after I organized a big international conference, again with Max Farah, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Leeds West Indian Carnival here at Leeds Beckett University. Now this is a picture here, this is the poster with Arthur France, the founder of Leeds West Indian Carnival, who's here tonight. And Arthur, you know, has always been we've always worked together well and been a wonderful supporter of my work. It's a privilege to have you here tonight, Arthur. Thank you. So that conference, we had people from all over the US, the UK, from the Caribbean, hundreds of participants and speakers from around the globe. And I don't think I'll ever have the energy to put off a conference of that scale again. But it energized and started so many exciting projects. And I also got to work with a woman called Dr. Kathy Thomas from the University of California, and we still collaborate today. I was a bit of a sort of lone ranger in some ways before I met Kathy, and now we are, you know, firmly kind of partners in crime in our research journey. Now, as many of you know, Leeds is the oldest Caribbean-rooted street carnival in Europe. And this is very important to remember. It's not London. Now, I've been playing mass. So mass is, for those of you who don't know, is short for masquerade, for about 15 years with a troupe called Harrison Bundy's Mama Dread's Masqueraders. Shout out any troop members. Yay, there they are. Now, I've always believed that to truly understand something, to research it properly, you have to live it. And that's why I play mass, and I think that playing mass is central to understanding Carnival. And I'd also like to mention my great friend Rose Farah here, also by my side, all Mama Dread troop revelry. So this is so we've got Arthur here on the poster, and these are the founders of Leeds West Indian Carnival who came back together. So you see the photos of them when they were a little bit younger behind it. And they came together at the conference. So it's wonderful to be able to bring all the founders together. And we also, we played mass during that carnival. So this is Tony Hall's Brexit Devils outside the Rose Bowl in the pouring rain, bringing carnival traditions into the heart of Leeds. And here's Mama Dread's Masqueraders doing their David Olawale mass. There's that beautiful picture of the hibiscuses and King David at the front. Now, to the uninitiated, Carnival may seem like a display of bodies, beads, bikini, and hedonism, but it is in fact deeply political. The history of Carnival in the Caribbean dates back to the 1700s, and it's a fusion between the rituals of Catholic planters who brought their tradition of Carnival, carne meaning meat, so to put away the meat, so a moment of wild debauchery before the restrictions of Lent, before the meat was put away. So the Catholics brought their traditions, and then they fused with African costuming, song, storytelling, and dance traditions brought over from Africa with the enslaved. So as the planters held their masked carnivals, enslaved people had their own festivities in the slave quarters, and these became focused on satire and the mocking of the planters. And then they also developed into historical reenactments, highlighting the pain of enslavement, and also a medium to protest against powerful oppressors. What interested me the most about Carnival masquerade is also the speech and storytelling elements. So those connect back with the African traditions of the griot, of the storyteller, of Anancy, of Brer Rabbit. Those with speech elements to their performances in Carnival are called the traditional mass characters, although I don't really believe in a dichotomy between the beads and bikini mass, soapy, and the traditional mass. You know, they're all traditional in many ways. But those masqueraders who have speech elements to their mass, they pass down those speeches through the oral traditions from one generation to another. And some, there's mass players I met in Trinidad who memorize over 200 speeches, but weren't able to formally read and write. So it's the workings of the oral tradition at large. We were able to publish all the papers, some of the key papers at the Carnival conference in this lovely special Carnival edition of the Caribbean Quarterly. And it was called Power, Performance and Play after the conference that we had here in Leeds. And this work on Carnival also took me to Trinidad as well as Leeds. These are images by Ashley Carell, one of them here, of Rose and I as Midnight Robbers at Leeds Carnival, and then also at in Trinidad Carnival, playing mask with the Mystery Raiders. I went there to research, and then at just the end of the sort of period of research, they were like, "Oh, you're coming to play mask with us?" I was like, "No, I'm here as a researcher." They're like, "No, we've got a hat, we've got a whistle, so you're going to come and play." And that was actually one of the most kind of challenging days of my life. It was like 8 hours on the road with some rather stroppy old men. But I survived, and when at the end of the day, they all totally warmed to me. They were like, "You did it!" And this is us. This is the Mystery Raiders in Trinidad at the end of a long day on the road. This research on Carnival led me to establish the Women in Carnival Research Network. And I established this at Leeds Beckett University with Dr. Kathy Thomas from California after I was awarded an Arts and Humanities Research Council grant, which is a fantastic grant which helps people in the arts and humanities to build global networks. So I was able to bring women across the world in conversation with each other about Carnival. So these images, this is the sort of core Women in Carnival group here. So we've got Professor Kim Vasdeville, Kathy Thomas, me, and Adana. So we all study Carnival in slightly different ways. Adana is a dancer. Professor Kim Vasdeville is an expert in New Orleans Carnival and baby doll traditions. And we were also able to host a symposium in New Orleans to teach scholars from historically Black university colleges more about Carnival traditions. So that took place last year. As part of the Arts and Humanities Research Council Women in Carnival project, Kathy and I had to deliver 3 international Carnival seminars in 3 locations, in Trinidad, in California, and in Leeds in 6 months. So that was a massive challenge. And we also wanted our participants to take part in Carnival and then have the symposium afterwards so that they could experience Carnival and then reflect on it academically. So we had those 3 seminars, and it was exhausting, it was exciting, and we pulled it off, and that formed the basis of our Women in Carnival network. So at the heart of what I've tried to do with the study of Carnival is to bring the artistic and the academic into dialogue with one another, because there are often suspicions on both sides, particularly in Carnival. I'm really proud to have started this network, and it has an international span. And we've got collaborators in the UK, the US, and the Caribbean. And what we ask as a group, as a network of Women in Carnival, is how Carnival might provide a platform for Black feminist activity and activism with the potential to influence wider cultural and social change. These 4 members of the Carnival crew, if you like, are a privilege to work with, and they invigorate me continually. And I would have never have thought that getting that grant, that networking grant, would have changed my academic path so dramatically. And we've just been successful in a prestigious application for funding at Harvard University. So we're going to be running a Women in Carnival symposium at Harvard University next year. And we're going to be able to bring women from Trinidad, different parts of the world, to Harvard to take part in dialogue with one another. In that. Thank you. And that's a picture of our Women in Carnival Research Network website, if anybody's interested. And our logo. What logo? So, and this is an image of Kathy and I with the Gold Digger baby dolls in New Orleans. So we were invited to play mass after a period of research with the baby dolls of New Orleans. And you know, it's a hard life, isn't it? Now, my research and activism have also found a home with the work of the David Oluwale Memorial Association as a volunteer and as a co-chair. Now, at the heart of what we do at the David Oluwale Memorial Association, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Anyway, DOMA. At the heart of what we do with DOMA is use art as a platform to call for social justice. Again, Max is pivotal here as the founder of DOMA. You know, DOMA first started in 2007 and then was firmly established here at Leeds Beckett in 2012. It's a small anti-racist charity with a big impact. And many of you know the story of David Oluwale. He came to Leeds in 1949 and was hounded to his death by 2 racist police officers. It's a tragic story. He was found murdered in 1969. Now, our aim is to use David's tragic story to try and ensure that the same thing doesn't happen again in this city. We campaign to raise awareness of racism, but also homelessness and ill mental health. And I'm the co-chair of the charity with the wonderful, glamorous Abigail Marshall-Katung, who's here, who currently our Lord Mayor. I love saying that. Our Lord Mayor. It's lovely to have you here with us, Abby. Now, Leeds Beckett are a real outward-facing university, and they've worked closely with DOMA. Students go on placements with DOMA, and we've done key projects together, including creating a timeline of David's life that was run by Henry Irving. And the module that I teach with Professor Rob Burrows, Black British Culture, they also created a wonderful Olawale zine with Doma. So this is just one example of how Leeds Beckett University support projects that have real impact in the world outside of academia. So that's impact in terms of making a progressive difference to the lives of people. And the uni have always supported me to become the sort of academic that I always wanted to be. So not sitting in my ivory tower pontificating, but working alongside other academics, other artists, other activists towards real social change. Yeah. And I want to thank Leeds Beckett University. And on the side here, this is one of our great triumphs is the Hibiscus Rising statue created by Yinka Shonibari in commemoration of David Olawale. And we have the blue plaque that was first stolen off the Leeds Bridge, but then replaced and then replaced again. It's firmly in place, not going anywhere. And then my Doma board members at the plaque unveiling there on Leeds Bridge. Now, all of this, I always feel the call for the mountains and the outdoors. Oh, sorry. I want to just mention as well this publication, Olawale Now, I edited with Cy Murray, which is a collection of contemporary responses to the David Olawale story, and a beautiful publication, even though I say so myself. Now, in all of this, I've always felt the call for the mountains and the outdoors. Now, I grew up in the mountains, and they've always been a backdrop to my childhood. In the past 3 years, I've been training to be a mountain leader. I've still got one small part of the assessment to go. And when I do complete it, I'll be the 3rd woman of colour in the UK to do so. And that really goes to show you how lacking in diversity the outdoor industry is. I conducted a small solo research project in 2024 to find out more about the rise in Black walking groups in the UK in the wake of the COVID pandemic and at the height of the global Black Lives Matter movement of 2020. Now, I find that these Black hiking groups play an invaluable role in people's lives in terms of well-being and also in terms of decolonizing the outdoors. I'm also proud to volunteer as a Black Girls Hike leader, and here we all are. Hi, Black Girls Hike! Lovely to have you here. Now, I use the term the Black outdoors as I'm interested in the way that we can decolonize, and that word can be bandied about, and I do like to unpick it, but to try and decolonize both the literary and physical landscapes of the natural world through improving accessibility, diversifying both the outdoors, but also diversifying nature writing. Writing about Britain's natural landscape has been dominated by white middle-class men, and that needs to change. So we need new voices which express the relationship to the natural world from new angles. Now, I plan to design mountain walks for Black and brown women, which culminate in creative activity where we express our experiences of that walk and of that connection to nature in poetry and in prose. I want to be a cog in the machine that sees change happen here. So you can look out for the evolution of that plan. The name that I have for these walks so far is Poetry in Motion. So I think that can be improved on. At this point, I also just want to mention my dearest friends and fellow explorers, Bridge, Rue, Vanya, and Leroy. They're my hike club. Where are they? My hike club. And for many years, we've put the world to rights during long walks in all weathers, which have helped us all survive and thrive. And this is a recent Black Girls Hike walk that we had in Hebden Bridge just last week, where it promised there was going to be no precipitation whatsoever. And as we all started on the walk, it began to snow. But we survived. Oh, we thrived. We had a great time. And this is an article that was recently in The Guardian on New Year's Day about Black Girls Hike and other organisations that are challenging rural stereotypes. Now, I want to finish with poetry, which for me brings all these elements of my work together and allows me to reflect creatively on my life and on the world around me. My collection, Bath of Herbs, pictured here, was published by the amazing People Tree Press in 2023. And I have another collection called Other Wild coming out next year. So a big shout out to all the People Tree Press authors and editors. You know it. And especially huge thanks to Jeremy Pontin, to Hannah Bannister, to Cherie Taylor-Baptiste, to Jacob Ross, to Jason, to Malika, to John Whale, to Romy Smith, to Hannah Stone, to all of those people that keep the poetry scene alive here in Leeds. I'm really proud to be published by People Tree. They're the biggest publishers of Caribbean writing, and they operate out a little back-to-back in Burley. That's their headquarters. And they have an enormous reach. My next collection, Other Wild, is also going to explore the healing properties of the natural world. And there's lots of poems about rivers in there, because you can't have enough poems about rivers. Or can you? And it explores my family life, but it also celebrates the stories of wild, errant, boundary-breaking women. So look out for Other Wild. As well as establishing the walking and writing retreat, Poetry in Motion, my future plans include finishing a book on the role of women in Carnival with Kathy, and that's going to be called The Power of Mass. We've had some interest from the publishers Roman and Littlefield so far. Publish my research findings on Black walking groups in the UK, and then in August to climb Kilimanjaro with my friend Ruth, to raise money for the leukemia charity, which helped my daughter Rose through her treatment, the charity Candle Lighters. Thank you, thank you. So to conclude, I'm so thankful to this university for supporting me on this journey. I'd also like to thank my students. My students really keep my ideas fresh. They invigorate me. I age, but they stay the same age. And I feel they keep me current. They keep me alive. They keep me, awake. They keep me focused on the now. And I learn so much from them and their young minds. So it's an absolute privilege, I think, to be a teacher and to do that service and to be with them. I'm proud to be a Leeds Beckett University professor. And I'm also so thankful to all of my colleagues like Rob Burrows, like James McGrath, like Caroline Herbert, who always supported me in what I do. This inaugural lecture has pushed me to reflect on 25 years of research here at Leeds Beckett University. And it's shown me how many entangled and rich connections there are between the different areas of my work. And also, it's made me think about how many incredible people I work with. And those are people who believe deeply in shaping a more egalitarian society, who struggle against racism, against homophobia, against sexism, and other oppressive forces. Writing, performance, music, art, these are conduits to empathy. And if we can empathize with one another, we can walk in each other's shoes. So as they say, the person who reads lives 1,000 lives, and the one who doesn't lives only one. I would also extend that out of just the scribal, but also say in the oral facilitates this. So those who tell and listen to stories also live many lives and are able to inhabit the worlds of others. Black cultural forms, such as folklore and carnival, have been used across the African diaspora as ways to creatively resist the most brutal forms of oppression and degradation. I see these cultural forms as facilitators of radical resistance and profound social change. It's been a privilege to spend my career studying them, and I'm thankful for everyone who's taken that journey with me. Now, I'm going to end with a picture and a poem. So I end with a picture of my family, because I know my daughter Rose will be thinking, there's no pictures of me. Sorry in advance, Rose. I would like to read you a poem from my next collection, Other Wild. So this poem is called Mardi Gras Under the Freeway. In New Orleans, there's the African-American district, Treme, had in 1968 a huge freeway built over it. That freeway, that enormous road, was able to take commuters from the center of New Orleans straight out to the more rich, privileged, predominantly white neighborhoods. So it passed right over the Black community. And because of that, it devastated the community. All the businesses that relied on passing trade were devastated. And they named this big freeway the Monster. And it's actually held up as a prime example of how transportation projects have exacerbated historic racial inequalities in cities across the US. Now, I thought that it was very poignant that in Mardi Gras, and there are two types of Mardi Gras really, there's the more official Mardi Gras, and then there is the Black Mardi Gras that happens in the Black neighborhoods like Treme. Now, Mardi Gras, Black Mardi Gras, culminates under that freeway. So this is a poem called Mardi Gras Under the Freeway, and it's inspired by the baby dolls that I played mass with in New Orleans. A lot of these baby dolls are in their 70s. They're incredible women, very, very strong women, and wow, they move. They can move. Mardi Gras Under the Freeway. As Miss Delphine steps out the door, she pauses. Sunlight skids up from the sidewalk and rests on her orange, hand-stitched Ankara dress, scatters itself across the wooden slats to hit her beaded shoes and scatter into a billion rays. Today, her ancestors will be proud. As she steps on her porch, she feels it. Drum, roll, tremble, procession, street, shake, drowning out the noise of interstate traffic. And she is gripped by a spirit that arches her back like that morning sunbeam cornering the door frame. She kicks her feet up high, high above her knees. Miss Delphine spins across hurricane-split paving and dances the dance of her black skin, which has been broken, passed over, worn thin, but now shines and rises with blaring brass and thumping drums. She walks towards the dark underpass and joins the baby dolls stepping out so pretty, a Black Indian who catches the same spirit, chanting in a tongue which only comes to him on this day, while the drummers snake the crowd to beat hard in the policeman's ears. Under the segregating highway, a trombone wail turns Miss Delphine liquid. She rolls her hips and follows the band, tricking time faster than Brer Rabbit as she moves her 70-year-old self in pitching rhythm. She joins the call rising up from the corner of the city to throw open white heaven and make some room, splitting through steel and concrete, demanding freedom from under the freeway with a fierceness so bright that when Miss Delphine walks home that night, she knows the stars cannot shine brighter than her people or the shimmer of her dancing shoes. Thank you all.
I'm not sure what I can add to this, but I will try. It's always a privilege to be here and to introduce our professors and listen to their stories, which are always idiosyncratic and which are always deeply personal. And I think we all take away different things, and I'm sure you all will take away different things. But there were two things that stood out for me. One was, as Emily mentioned, what we try and do in our research at Leeds Beckett is to make a difference, to people, to make a difference to communities, to use our curiosity, to use our skills, to use our learning, to do something that is meaningful. And I think Emily is just such a fabulous example of bringing that to life. So. There is one other thing, however, and I've two things that stood out for me. One, when Emily was talking about only being ever the third woman of color to become a mountain leader, and also this when she was talking about having grown a thick skin in the aftermath of the racist and misogynistic attacks that she suffered following the publication of her hugely important research. And only last week, our higher education statistical agency has published data on the academic workforce in UK universities, and still Black professors are less than 1% across the academic workforce in the UK, so much so that most of the funders do not report on it because they're saying there are too few professors of color to be reported on. It shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this way. And whilst Emily may have grown a thick skin, I think it's on all of us to make a change rather than on our scholars who are doing such fantastic work. So I hope today's lecture was also a call to action for all of us to make that difference. And Emily is already leading. So thank you very much.